Hello, everyone. Welcome to Capital Region eWeb's virtual workshop series on personal branding for board candidates presented by Kelly Wang. I'm Neo Gamo. I'm the chair of the eWeb committee, and I'll be moderating today's session. Before we get into it, I'd like to give an overview of Women in Bio and the Capital Region chapter. Women in Bio is an organization of professionals committed to promoting careers, leadership, and entrepreneurship for all women in the life sciences. Women in Bio was founded in 2002, and the Capital Region chapter was founded in 2011, originally as the national headquarters of Women in Bio. This organization provides a continuity of support from classroom to boardroom, academia to industry, first job to last, and idea to entrepreneur. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Kelly Wang. Kelly is an executive leadership coach with over 20 years of experience in teaching, B2B marketing, and management consulting. She started her board journey back in 2006 when she joined a 4-person mutual fund board, and she's currently serving on the scientific advisory board for Eagle Genomics in the UK. She has also served as the co-chair for Women in Bio's Boardroom Ready program in 2019. While she continues to advocate for gender equity and boardroom diversity, she's active in contributing to the Forbes Coaching Council and teaching at UCSD. I just wanted to give an overview. There will be 5 virtual sessions in this series, with each session consisting of a group session followed by breakout sessions. Except for today, there will be no breakout sessions today. While the group sessions are open to all, if you'd like to attend the breakout session, please commit to attending at least 4 out of 5 sessions. Now I will hand it over to Kelly.
All right. Well, the other Kelly, can you check that my slides are coming up? Yeah, there we go.
Yep,
well,
they're
thank you.
fine.
Yeah, perfect. So thank you for the introduction. I'm so glad to be here with you all to talk about basically, how to think about getting on boards, and also what does that all mean, right? What kind of boards, what type of boards, and specifically, I've been a part of Boardroom Ready, which is the Women in Bio's board readiness program for women in the life sciences. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that. But then in the second half, I'm going to get to the kind of the meat of the conversation. So, what is it that you need to do, right? Those early first steps to get yourself ready to serve on a board, which is to start developing your personal brand. So let me get started on that. So did it go to the next page?
Yes.
Yes. Perfect. So I'm sharing some good news here. So in terms of what's happening in the board diversity world, on the left-hand chart, okay, is there a way I could show? Is it showing the full screen?
It is. It's not in presentation mode.
Okay, perfect. So on the left-hand side, what you're seeing is that pharma and consumer goods, this is where women on boards, the representation has been close to 30%, right? Almost a third. However, I also work with a lot of women in tech. So on that front, whether it's energy services or software or IT hardware, they're not doing nearly as well. Now, I don't have an explanation, and the latest Crunchbase research demonstrated that even back in 2022, on private boards at least, the life science boards have close to 20% representation, but then the tech side of things is more like 13%. So again, there's something we're doing right here. So that's the good news. And then the other part of getting on boards is what I'm seeing with this it's not in presentation. Okay. Well, as long as you guys can see it, I won't mess with it. So yeah, so back to the pharma, biotech, and healthcare. These are the industry most likely to add female directors, right? This is from research that was done at the Board Leadership Center at KPMG. But also, as you see, the MBAs, right? the business-minded folks do tend to dominate, to be dominant in terms of getting onto boards. But nonetheless, having that PhD and having the MD is also very helpful here, right? And I also cited that statistic earlier already that in private companies that in the life sciences, at least 3/4 of companies already have women directors. So again, kudos. But somehow women of color, right? There's still work to be done. And also just in terms of pure numbers, right? The female representation on boards is still not, quite where we liked it to be, right? At parity, since women are half the population. So next, let me get to, again, specifically, I sit here in San Diego. So in San Diego, we're lucky that California has been kind of leading that charge in having some, so there were two laws. There was SB 826, where we're trying to mandate more women onto boards. And then there was also AB 979 to get more diverse director represented. However, as you know, DEI has been under attack. So both of those rules are being appealed. But if you, again, look at, on the chart on the left, the Europeans obviously are ahead, right? The French companies are at 40% or better. And then, the UK, Australia, even Canada, right? These Commonwealth countries and Scandinavian countries are ahead. And California is sitting there, right, at about 1/3. And then when you look at public companies on the right, that's from the latest research too, that public companies are about 20, I want to say right around 29% with the Russell 2000. I think Fortune 500 is a little better. And then only 7% are women of color. Again, more work to be done there. And then we also have 12% that have gender balanced boards. So again, the momentum is getting there, but obviously there's more we can do. So that gets back to why I'm here to talk to you. So the Boardroom Ready program, I think earlier you saw in Neil's chart that we're part of Women in Bio's kind of full life cycle, right? From the classroom to the boardroom. So in our Boardroom Ready program, where I served as a former co-chair, we've been able to get 170 women to become part of the program. And more specifically, I think we're 135 women having onboarded. So it's a great program in that, the success speaks for itself. But I want to tell you that they were humble beginnings. At the beginning, it was just a group of women saying to themselves, we need to do something about female representation on life science boards. And that's how they got started back in 2016 and got this group of women to go through the board training, get the recruiters involved, and obviously Women in Bio support has gotten us to where we are today. And also what sets us apart, it is the fact that it's not just about like the board mechanics, I call it. So we have one part of the program that's conducted at George Washington University in September, where you do go and learn about, the duty of care, duty of loyalty, what it takes, the insurance, all of that. But then more importantly, comes November, we do this retreat where all the alumni comes back, the recruiters come, and also our sponsors are there as well. And so there's really this network. And I want to say it's more of a lifetime commitment when you join Boardroom Ready, because our alums come back, right? The alums that are now onboarded, they come back to become mentors. And then our alumni who are first-time board members come back to tell each other about the stories of how they got that first board. So, just later I'm going to talk about some of the other Boardroom Ready programs, but for as far as standing apart, it is creating this virtuous network, right? We started out, like I said, in those humble beginnings in 2016, but then since then, every year we added more and more women, and we support and sponsor and peer coach each other and go through all of that. So I think that's the key part of what I want to have you understand about, why Boardroom Ready is different. And the other thing you can do is there is a directory of all the women in this program. So if you are thinking about it, I would recommend that you send the email to boardroomready@womeninbio.org to request access to that directory, because it shows you who are the women that are selected. It shows you their contact information, it shows you their industry, and maybe even some of the boards they're serving on. So it gives you a good sense of who, is selected for the program, and also to kind of expand your network, right? If there's somebody in your industry, see if you can reach out to them and ask them more about either the program or the boards they serve on. And so again, for more information, not sure anybody can do it right now, but feel free to take that link and pop it into the chat. So if any of you want to find out more about the Boardroom Ready program, it's there. Okay. And let's see next. Go forward, not back. Oh. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the other Boardroom Readiness program, right? And so the truth of it is, what I want to tell women is that it's not a pipeline problem, it's a network problem. Because, the boards that are searching for qualified women, it's not there aren't enough qualified women. In fact, most of the women that come to Boardroom Ready are more than qualified. So what I want to say is, these Boardroom Ready program, yes, they're going to help teach you about board mechanics. They're going to teach you about, the do's and don'ts, but then they don't really give you that, like I said, that lifelong network of, other women that are serving on boards, other women that might be able to come back and give you advice. And again, other women who are willing to be mentors and sponsors and give you that chance at the first board seat. So the other programs, as I said, whether that's Stanford, Harvard does them, Kellogg does them, and they have fantastic professors, because I've had some of them. They're really good professors. But then, once you finish a program, you have your credential, right? But then where's the network? So again, I think if you're considering what you want to do in terms of your next step, definitely look at the cost, because I know the cost of some of those university programs are upwards of $20,000, $30,000. Do they bring you a network? Do they help with the board placement? And also continue education, right? Some of the, like I said, with Boardroom Ready, we have the annual retreat where we bring people back and throughout the year too. So that continual education piece. I know some of the schools are very good with that, but some of the other programs, it's one and done, right? You get your program, you get your credential, and that's that. The other bit of information I want to get to is that there are different types of roles. So chances are, I think most of the people in the room are interested in, are probably more likely to get a private company board role than a public company. And I'm going to explain why. So the private companies tend to be either executives serving on the board, right? If you're a CEO or CFO, you automatically get a board seat. But then the investors also get one, right? Too, right? So the venture capital or the angel investors or even the partners early on get a seat. But then the most likely role for women in the life sciences is to get this independent board seat. So that is what is the type of seats that you might be looking at. So I'm going to get into that a little bit more. Okay, so let's see. If I do this presenter mode, I'm sorry, my screen just not behaving today. It was working earlier, but yeah, unless does Kelly or can somebody go into their presentation instead of me? And then
Yeah,
I'll just tell you to advance the slides.
Yeah, I can share.
Okay.
Yeah, just let me know when you want me to advance.
Okay, I'm seeing your slides.
Oh, no, these are the slides you sent me.
Okay, but I think what's showing
hold on.
is,
Oh, sorry, hold on. Let me try again. This one?
There you go. And then, yes, presenter mode. Got it. Okay, so these are the different types of the boards that I'm sharing with you. This is from Blue Steps. It's an executive recruiting firm. So what you're seeing here is, as I said earlier, the big public boards. So Fortune 500, Russell 2000. These are bigger boards with about 8 to 11 people on the boards, and the terms can be, 10 to 12 years. And the average is about 8.5 years. So you are part of this big group, and typically there are different committees, right? So I mentioned that there's selection committee, sometimes they're called nomination and governance committee. There's audit committees, there are risk committees, there are, even like innovation committees. So the public boards are bigger, and then those 10 years tend to be a little longer too. The nonprofits, again, this might be more likely that you'll find a board seat because they are bigger boards, up to 30. And for fundraising reasons, it makes sense, right? That they have these bigger boards from different industries and different categories. And then the terms can be 2 to 5 years. And you're definitely there to provide some governance. And also you may need to commit to fundraising, right? Helping with the fundraising or however much amount that they like you to contribute. The private equity boards are anywhere from 3 to 6 years. Again, they tend to be smaller than the public boards, as I mentioned. And then the focus is much more goals directed, right? It might be that you're trying to take this company public. It may be you're trying to get it acquired, and maybe a turnaround. So those private equity boards, again, a bit more specific than the private boards. And then the private boards in general, as I mentioned about those independent board director seats, the size can vary. I sat on a private board for a mutual fund, which was only 4 people. But 9, that actually sounds a little big to me. The most private boards I've come across is a little smaller than 9. 3 to 6 years in terms of your tenure. Again, you're usually there to improve risk, maybe to help with some management issues. You're probably earlier stage too. So some of your expertise may actually turn into a role. So if you're coming as a CFO sitting on the board, you may actually end up doing some CFO type of activities. So again, private boards, private equity boards, nonprofit boards, public boards, different sizes, and also the compensation is different. So again, I can answer that in the Q&A. In terms of what they're looking for, the top 3 traits that I've come across, and also from this Blue Step recruiter, is that they want you to be strategic, right? So big picture view, a good understanding of the industry, and definitely bringing in the functional expertise, right? A lot of times you'll pick for a functional expertise. So you need to be able to kind of think, down vertically deep, but also think wide, what I call T. So think deep and also think wide. And the other part of that is the adaptability, because at any point, these companies can go through some big changes. And so they're looking for you to be able to adapt, right? So whether it's an early stage company becoming bigger, scaling up, or you're a turnaround situation. So again, when things do turn around, having somebody who's more turnaround oriented into being more growth oriented. And lastly, these are small teams, right? So they're looking for candidates that are, EQ driven, who understand how to adapt, who have good contextual thinking. And then the competency that I've seen along the way, definitely, I think, the CFO type expertise is very much high on the list. You saw earlier my chart about MBAs being highly, sought after in terms of credentials. Digital fluency is definitely more and more the topic of conversation, right? AI, cybersecurity. And lastly, communication skills. You probably have seen universities, where the leaders, the communication hasn't been as, what the public wanted. So again, in the crisis mode, it's very important the boards have key communication skills outwards, but also within, right? Within the team and within the C-suite executives, and also to the employees. So next, can you advance the slides? Right. So here is where I would like you to think about, again, is this for me, right? When you think about, all the things that you could be doing in your next
Hi,
step.
Kelly. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't know if everybody has the same problem, but I'm still seeing your screen and I'm
okay.
still seeing your slide 9.
All right, let me see. Should
I
I
believe
stop
you have to
sharing?
unshare.
Yeah, so if I stop sharing and
That's
then
great.
yeah,
We see the "Is this for me" slide. Anna is in presenter mode.
got it. Okay. So yeah, I think we were both sharing. That's why that was the issue. So is this for me, right? When you think about the fit, here are some questions I want you to think about, right? So do you have the time commitment? And one of the first thing we ask the boardroom ready candidates to consider is to have their CEOs vouch for them, that number one, the CEOs know that they're going to take on board roles, and number two, like sponsoring them in the sense that knowing they're going to spend some time away from their day job, right, to sit on these boards. So the time commitment and also letting the team, the stakeholders around you understand what it takes is part of that. Also, do you believe in the business goal and what this company is after? And again, I've seen people join boards where they're not really, there for the business. They're there for the prestige. And I'm sorry to say, like, that may not be the right thing, right? It's not going to be the good fit for you if you're not buying into the product or not believing of the CEO's visions or not getting along with the board, right? Am I comfortable with the needs that this board, so usually the boards have some sense of what they need a new board member to come in to do. So as you're interviewing, as you're meeting the team, it's very important you understand, like, what do they want me to come in and do, right? And sometimes what they say and what they mean, there might be some misalignments. So this is, again, why interviewing and talking to many people who are outside, who knows that company or knows those board members that you're interviewing with would be very important. Who else is on the board, right? You're going to be interviewing with the rest. And actually, that's the other thing I tell my coachees, that they should make all the board members and the C-suite level people available to you to speak to. If they're not, that's kind of, again, a question mark. Is there any conflict of interest? Again, right? Some of you work for very big companies with lots of different, sub companies or companies looking to acquire. So that could create a conflict of interest. So again, some of them I've seen had to go up, a level to HR or even the CEO level to get approval to make sure there's no conflict of interest. Any financial legal responsibilities? I also have seen and doing the George Washington course in terms of you do need some sort of insurance in serving on boards. And again, sometimes it's called directors and officers insurance. Sometimes you might have an umbrella policy, but it is something that, you're open to, right? Like if there any sort of disagreement on lawsuits, you probably have seen it with Illumina here in San Diego, that boards can be at risk of being sued. So again, you need to be comfortable with that and what that means. Relationship between the board and management, again, while you're interviewing or talking to people within your network, it's very important you have a sense of that. And then what unique value do I bring to the board? Well, this is why I'm talking to you, because instead of letting the board define what that is, I think you should know that very well yourself. So that is the part of the personal branding work that I've been talking about, and I'm going to review the rest of the presentation today, but that's something you do need to be very clear on before you walk into the interview. And then lastly, how effective will you be, right? And so back to what I said about board diversity, they found, research has shown that if it's just one woman, the token, right? The token just isn't nearly as effective, right? So we showed the statistic where 75% of the private boards have at least one woman on board. While sadly, I'm gonna say that actually isn't ideal, because the one token woman isn't going to be kind of bringing the full benefit of that different perspective. And that's why the SB 826 mandated that it should be two, if it's a bigger board, it should be 2 or 3 women. So again, we need more diversity in order to get the benefit of diversity. Now, lastly, if some of you have come to the conclusion like, I'm not quite ready for this, or I might want to hold off on it, then what I would like you to do is there's this great board diversity playbook that's from the Cal Partners Project and also from Stanford, that they show kind of how companies can think about how to diversify their boards. So maybe my one favor to ask of you is, even if you decided this isn't the journey for you, think about how you can bring the conversation about board diversity back to your own company using this board diversity playbook. Okay, so next, I think this is where we're going. Yeah, so this is where I'm going to stop for questions. In terms of, is this for you, boardroom ready? I can definitely take some of your questions now. And then, when I get into the personal branding, at the end, I'll make sure to save time for questions. So for now, about boardroom ready, the type of boards, any questions for me?
I can tell you the Q&A is empty in the chat as well. So I think it's open to any live questions if folks want to speak up.
Yeah, or if you want to raise your hand, if I can see you, or.
Hi, Kelly. This is Wanda.
Hi, Wanda.
Hi, thank you for this presentation. Can you share compensation ranges for each type of board, just in general?
Yeah. So number one, I'm going to send you to, is it Jay Thielander? They do these surveys, so I've usually been able to get my information directly from them. So the public boards, it really ranges. I've heard people from 5 figures to 7 figures type of salary and stock options. So that's public boards. The private boards, it can differ between, stock options, right? Especially the smaller companies, they tend to give stock option grants. And I've heard usually the average around 1%. And then those private equity boards probably has even more incentives for the management and probably the boards, because like I said, they're so goal-oriented in terms of whether it's a turnaround or a merger or a sale. So there might be more stock options there. I don't deal with private equity boards as much, so I don't think I'm as certain about what I'm giving you. And then nonprofits, again, I've seen it all kinds of ways. It could be that they give you a stipend for every time you attend a meeting, or there's also what they call it. You have to commit to giving a certain amount. So in fact, you're not getting paid. You have to commit to giving a certain amount too. Does that answer your question, Wanda?
Very helpful. Thank you, Kelly.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Happy to answer any right now.
Kelly, can you repeat the public board compensation reference? We have a request in the Q&A.
So the J. Thielander, J. Thielander, I believe consulting is what they're called. And so usually I think if you fill out one of their surveys, you get their reports. And by the way, in the boardroom, so those of you that are interested in applying for Boardroom Ready, I think our application should come out mid-January. So it's coming, it's gonna come soon. And in the years past, usually the due date is middle of March. And then you find out whether you've been selected by the summer. And as I said, the fall, you're committed to coming to the George Washington University program in your neck of the woods in September. And then by November, there's usually a retreat that we do annually. Yes, I see a hand up, Martha.
Oh, hi. Thanks so much for this. One of the questions that I have is when I look at a lot of board postings, as I'm just trying to get a feel, of course, people are looking for the ability to be connected to VCs or fundraise, which is, I think, a big hurdle to get over initially, because when you're just joining boards, you may not have already, like I'm currently raising a seed round for my company. So I don't have that track record. So if you could give us a little advice for how to either work around it or give confidence that we have other very valuable skill sets
Right.
And, that may come with time. That would be helpful.
Yeah. And, again, it's also very context driven. And what I'm going to get into when I talk about, activating your network, that really is a big part of it, because most of the board seats that I've seen, my coachees and also the women in Boardroom Ready land is through somebody they know. Now, it may not be somebody they directly know, but it's in their network, right? Like somebody within their network knows, who they are. And then when they say, oh, you know what, I want to sit on boards, they're like, oh, I didn't know that. And then that's how that all happens. However, in terms of like those early steps, it is learning more about governance, Martha. So whether you get to sit, in your own, as I said, right, there's those executive seats. So whether you're coming into the boards as an executive, or you're presenting to the board, or, sending outreaches to the boards, to the board members sitting on your current company's board, that's all part of it. Like learn whether you can, I think what I've seen people do is, it's like putting on the training wheels, right? So how do you do that? How do you get some of that governance experience? So it could be that you're a board observer. So I've seen that. That's one way. It could be that you're serving on a nonprofit board where they have people who are board members on real boards, right? I don't mean real in a sense, sorry, corporate boards. I shouldn't say real, right? There's nonprofit boards where there are a lot of people who are on corporate boards. So that's another place, right? You can learn to get to know those people. And there's also ways of, like I said, activating your network in terms of, hey, who do I know that sits on boards that knows about my experience and knows about my expertise? But then before you even do that, you do need to kind of start saying like, hey, this is what I want to do. So Martha, does that answer your question in terms of like those early first steps?
Yes, thank you.
Learning about governance?
Yes. I think it's really valuable to have this network. So I think this call and hopefully connecting with everyone on this call will help get us all started.
Yeah, and then check out the directory for sure, the women, because again, I know the life science world is only so big. So chances are there's somebody right? And so getting to know board members, getting to know people who's been through this program will all be helpful.
And just
Okay.
one follow-up is you mentioned the board observer.
Yeah.
How do you suggest approaching people to request board observer?
Again, it's through your network, Martha. If they know you have a particular, I call it from the movie Taken, when Liam Neeson says, I have a particular set of skills.
No.
It's kind of letting people know, like, I have a particular set of skills. You'll want me there. Right? But first you have to tell people you're interested in doing that. And so I think it does take a bit of research, like, okay, who do I know that sits on boards? What kind of boards do I want to learn from? And then, again, activating, right? Like, hey, I see so-and-so, my good friend, sits on this kind of board. Can I come and be a board observer? Right? And then, of course, you have to like demonstrate why you want to do that. So that's that personal branding piece I'm going to go walk through with you, right? Like, what do you bring to the picture? What can you help them think through? What's some around the corner, things that they haven't had anybody come through to tell them about, but you have that unique set of skills to be able to either walk them through it or help them think about some questions they haven't thought of.
All right, wonderful. Thank you.
And then I'll take one more and then we'll get back to the content. Katya?
Yes, thank you very much. Katya Vertwong, fantastic information. Thank you. I am sorry if I missed the reference for the time that each board would require, but it would be helpful to just get a general idea on all these different types of boards, what to expect like on the quarterly or annual basis. Thank you.
Oh, how often they meet, you mean?
How often they meet, and I'm sure there is other responsibilities, reviews,
the time commitment,
presentations.
Yeah, and it does vary because, for example, the public companies, one of the things that they're really afraid of is having an activist. Have you heard of that? Like an activist investor comes along, wants to wipe out the board, right? Change the direction of the company. And so that type of board, all of a sudden, it could be 6 months that you're trying to work through, like, okay, who's this activist? How do I, right? How do we either want to fend them off or go with what they're saying, right? So those kind of public boards, that can be a lot of time. However, the board that I sat on, which is a mutual fund, it really is mainly just quarterly and then being up to date on what's happening with the company. And then every now and then we'll get, like in my case, I was on the audit committee, so I had to meet with the auditor, so that's some additional time there. Nonprofit boards can also vary. Some of them are very active. They probably meet monthly or have networking events. And then some of them will be just like, hey, fundraising time, they need you. And then the private equity boards, depends on the investors. Some of them will be very active. They want to see you all the time and want you to be, at the ready. And then some of them will be kind of hands off, right? Where the management's like, nope, we got it. You don't need to come in and, tell us what to do, kind of thing. Does that answer your question, Katya? Yeah. And I think that's the research, right? That's the part about activating your network to find out what type of boards, who are the investors, what are the expectations, who's more likely to want to have new blood versus ones that are like, oh no, we have our board said, we don't need anybody, kind of thing. Okay, now let's get back to the content. So I'll get everybody back to what they're doing before they joined us. Oh, so it does look like, oh yeah. So it does look like I'm gonna run a little over today. So if you do need to leave, I think we're gonna be able to share the recordings, right? So we'll be doing that. And obviously, those of you that want to stay for the Q&A at the end, be sure to stay till the end, but I am gonna run a little over, sorry, in terms of the noon time. Yeah, I'm gonna run past the noon time is what I mean. Okay, back to the content. Oh, should I share? I think I got mine to work now. Yes, okay, so let me turn that. So how do I get started? So, so in terms of personal branding, this is something that I show to my students and my clients. Because here, if you think of social media, right? There's a lot of people talking, there's a lot of people saying different things. And even if you think of someone like Bart Simpson, should be easy to find, right? Giant yellow head, bulging eyes. Where could he be? So anybody sees him yet? He's actually in here twice. So without further ado, I'll show you where he is. Right, so there's Bart Simpson, and he's also on the lower left if you have really good eyes, because my eyes aren't so good anymore. So the point here is in social media, right? I know I have a lot of people saying, oh, just go to social media, talk about yourself, right? That's the way to do personal branding. And I'm here to tell you, like, it's much more intentional than that, right? If you just jump on your LinkedIn today and start saying like, hey, I want to be on a board, that's actually the easiest part. There's a lot more involved. So I'm here to tell you what that is, right? The planning and the thinking that it would take to really build an effective personal brand. So again, back to, either is Bart Simpson in that eye chart or someone like Waldo, right? This quote from somebody who wrote the book that, this book is not for sale. Like, today, you don't want to be Waldo, right? You don't want to be blending in and, in that eye test wall, right? Where people can't find you. So the way to go about building a personal brand is to make sure that people that are looking for your special set of skills can find you. So what does that take, right? So back to when you think about what a brand is, and the one I usually use, I teach marketing, is Coca-Cola, right? So on the upper half of this Coca-Cola brand is the rational part, right? It's a beverage. It's got features, right? It's refreshing. But then there's also the brand that's got the emotional pieces to it. So, you know, when you think about Coca-Cola, it's usually tied to celebrations, right? At least back to my parents' and grandparents' days. We only had Coca-Cola if we're celebrating a birthday, right? We didn't drink it every day. So celebrations, right, is part of that emotional tie. But also there's a nostalgia, back to what I said, right? You know, having those birthdays, having those Olympic, right? So Coca-Cola is a big sponsor during the Olympics. So it's that, right? Like think back to when, you know, your team won the Super Bowl, or when your favorite athlete won the Olympic gold medal. Those kind of celebration and nostalgia is what Coca-Cola wants you to remember, right? To tie when you think about all those amazing things happening that, you know, Coke was there for you. So how do we do that, right? Like, okay, I understand it for a Coke, but what does that mean for me as a person? So to think about that, I usually start with telling, you know, my students and coachees, like, okay, there's personal brand, which, like it or not, you already have it, right? If you're one of those skeptics that are like, no, I don't need a personal brand. Well, like it or not, you already have it. And that's because you already have a reputation out there. There's already an experience that people have had in interacting with you. And that's your brand, right? The noun. The personal brand's already out there. That perception, those impressions, and coming across, you know, working with you, that's your brand out there already. However, we also can actively work on these strategic actions, as I say here, personal branding, to allow people to experience you besides just the rational, you know, hey, she's a CFO, or hey, she's a coach, but also more importantly, how they make you feel, right? The emotional tie of what you bring in terms of that interaction. So let me tell you more about that. So I've developed this 5-step process, right? Where, you know, we actually have the 5 workshops built this way to think about, you know, step 1 is to align, right? What are the important things that you want to achieve in life? How to align that to this board journey of yours. The number 2 part is your aspiration, right? What do you want to accomplish in terms of being on a board, or even on a job that you're looking to get the next time? Your approach, how do you approach that? What I call it is landing the plane. There's so many things you can do, right? I can get on 10 different social media platforms, but I won't do any of them well. So how do I really focus my efforts? To activate, so as I said, in terms of networking, to be able to really activate your network and let people know, here's what I want to do next. And here's a consistent story about why I want to do this. And lastly, I think most importantly, is finding the community. So whether it's to build, you know, more social impact or to develop better drugs, what are some impact and communities that's really going to help you do that? So each of our workshops kind of built around, you know, each one of these steps. So let me get into more of what we're doing today. So in terms of thinking about aligning, right? So let me go back to the 5 steps again. So I know a typical thing that I run into is a lot of coaches come to me and already they want to start working on their bio. They want to work on their LinkedIn. They want to redo their resume, which is more in that approach step 3. But in fact, what I've always had to do is dial them back to the why, right? Define your why. Why do you want to do this? What's important to you? And so that gets me to this next piece, right? If you want to serve on a board, or if you're looking for that next step in terms of your career, I always step my coachees through this, which is, you know, thinking about your values, right? What's important to you, or your compass. And then to ask yourself the questions like, what are my strengths? What brings me joy? What are my special set of skills? What challenges have I had as a leader or as a scientist? And how do you want people, so back to what I said about the Coca-Cola emotional branding piece, how do you want people to know about you, to feel about working with you? And then how do you want that to come across, right? So in thinking about that, I'm borrowing from this branding framework, right? It's called CAN. Yes, I can. CAN is the consistency, the authority, and the narrative. And so here, you know, having you think about like your narratives, right? And the way I talk about it is basically to tie your history, right? The past versions of you to the current version, which is also the evergreen, I call it, right? Your values should be evergreen mostly. And then the future you, right? So when I want to give somebody a sense of who I am, I want to give you that past version, the present version, and also that future version. So let me show you an example of how I do that. So I mentioned that the North Star or your values are pretty much like your compass, right? Your north, south, east, west. Well, I've done that for my own values. So this is Kelly, briefly, where I start with thinking about my strengths, right? So I call it, my integrity, my, knowledge gathering, right? Like I've done well in academics. So knowledge, teaching, learning, that's all part of me. But also the integrity piece. So I have a story about that when I was thinking about, what does integrity mean to me? Well, one of the projects I've had as a coach is to facilitate leadership classes, right? So one of the projects that came to me, there was already a coach one, and they wanted me to be coach one as a copy. So I'm a copy of coach one as opposed to just a coach two. And so in doing that project, I found time and time again, like it just didn't feel right to me to use somebody else's deck to, be expected to kind of, behave like her, interact with my audience, in a way that wasn't authentic to me. So in the end, I ended up having to resign from that project, at a cost, right? So that's the piece about integrity. Like if I felt something wasn't authentic to what I was doing, I knew I had to, kind of take a step back and reevaluate. And then in terms of passion, definitely having come through computer sciences, as I mentioned, I want to improve female representation in tech and life science, but also the education, right? Because what I've seen time and time again, women in the sciences, we're kind of in that vacuum where we think we're the only one. And in fact, you have a community, right? But we have to go out and actively look for it. So I know that was the case when I was in computer science. I should have been spending more time with the Society of Women Engineers, but I just thought, well, every time I've been the only woman in math, the only woman in physics, I just didn't think to kind of dive into community. So I'm doing that now, but that's part of, the passion, right? Figuring out what I went wrong and to learn better and do better. My cultural heritage, I'm an immigrant. I came to the States in 1979. So it's very much a part of me to think about like, there isn't a culture that's better than the other. My East-West culture both complement each other. So that humility of, not saying one's better than the other. And lastly, in terms of how I make a difference, I've learned that through teaching, I'm much better at like mentoring, coaching one-on-one. So in doing this, that's helped me figure out what I'm good at, right? Which is to evangelize, to teach, and to coach. So I'm hoping you also can figure out something about like what's unique about you, right? To be able to talk about yourself, to find those stories that make you sound authentic. Okay, so next. The other thing, so that's step one, right? The aligning. So that's going to be homework. I'm going to talk more about that towards the end. I'm going to have you guys do your own values wheel and figure out kind of your north, south, east, west. And then the next time we meet on January 25th, I'm hoping we can take advantage of another coaching friend of mine. She's going to come and help us talk about the vision board exercise. So I'm showing you an example prompt. And so this has a bigger implication, right? Other than just your professional pursuits. you know, your families, your relationships, you know, what's important to you, to kind of think about that, right, in a visual way. And I know from coaching that visualization has a lot of benefits in terms of helping you get to that next level, right? Because if you can't dream it, you can't be it. So, you know, I'm hoping next time on the 25th, we can do some of that vision work. And then step number 3 is that landing the plane piece I mentioned. So starting with the chart on the right. So as again, as a marketing professor, I'm very accustomed to talking about the go-to-market strategy. But before you go to market, which is what I said about people wanting to do their LinkedIn, their bios, you know, right away, I usually have to kind of pull them back, right? To think about, well, what's your product, right? What is it that you're delivering? And so that's what we're doing today, right? Like, what is it about me that I bring to those boards, right? And that requires you to do some of those deep dive questions, like, what is it about me? Why am I different, right? And then to think about, okay, so the go-to-market also requires you to think about the audience, right? What types of boards? So we went over that earlier. What types of boards make sense for me? Where can I get that board observer seat? Where might I find a nonprofit board that aligns with how I want to make an impact? And next, also to think about, like, okay, well, how do I tell people what I want to do, right? That's your amplifying your message or getting on social media piece. That's the promotion. And then distribution is it through word of mouth? Do I want to start writing a blog, right? How do I get my message out? And lastly, you guys asked about the salaries. How do I want to do this? Is this going to pay for my lifestyle, right? Do I want to do board seats full time, or do I want to just do it as a side thing, right? So it's to think about that. And do you want to do it as a way of, like I said, supplementing your income? Do you want to have stock options, or do you want to be like doing it, you know, as a way to contribute to your community, right? So that's the giving piece. So the approach, as I said, is thinking about, like, and this is the challenge I've had with many of my clients. You guys have had plenty of experiences, right? 20, 30 years. And I know when I looked at their resumes, it's very impressive. However, the board selection committees and the recruiters don't have time to read through a 4-page resume, right? So you'll basically have to kind of really condense all that rich experience, the 20, 30 years, into 2 or 3 paragraphs, right? So that turns into your bio to really quickly summarize you and do a very good job of concisely describing what you do. And then, even more importantly, when you're meeting somebody for the first time, typically there's kind of an elevator pitch or intro that you have to give, right? So again, if you could succinctly take those 30, 40 years into the 2 paragraphs and then finally down to the 2, 3 sentences, that's how people are able to really understand what you do and consistently tell that story about you. And so recently I went through an exercise where, you know, in a group like this, where everybody gave an introduction, but then we asked the other 30, 40 people in the room to describe what they just heard. And sure enough, there was 30, 40 different versions, right? Because when we give those introductions, people pick kind of what's, you know, what they're hearing, right? Or what an important piece that they captured in that introduction, and they took that with her or with you know, with them in terms of re-describing. So it's kind of like that telephone game, right? The initial message was XYZ. The next time it was like XXYZ. And then by the end, it may not sound like XYZ anymore. So the more concise you can make those bios and elevator pitches simple and easy to remember, the less likely every time you give an introduction, there's going to be 500 different versions. So that's what that's about in terms of landing the plane, right? Being very exact and knowing where you want your messages to land. Okay, and so from there, and you saw me do it when I described my values wheel, your story is your leadership story, right? So the way to amplify what you bring to the table is to think about different stories that illustrates your values. So you guys may have heard that, you know, George Washington chopped down the cherry tree. And then he had to admit to his father, well, it was me, and that was demonstrating his honesty. Well, actually, that story was made up by his biographer. But you see how telling that story kind of was illustrating like something about George Washington and how honest he was. So each one of the stories we tell about ourselves also gives you an opportunity, right, to demonstrate that value or soft skill. So let me show you what that looks like. And working on amplifying, your message and what you're about, I typically have 4 ways of doing that. So first one, and this is the typical interview questions like, tell me about yourself, right? And so I have my coachees prepare these origin stories, right? And that goes back to looking at your values, like what am I about? What's been the same about me that's an evergreen trait, right? And so if you think about in the Hollywood version, the Marvel superheroes all have an origin story, right? So through their ups and downs, they figured out what their superpower is. Well, you have one too. So that's the way to answer the tell me about yourself story. The next one is your potential, right? Tell me about what you're capable of, or tell me what you'll be doing in 5 years. So again, when you look through your wheel of potential and when things you want to accomplish, how can you tell that story? And then the next one is your value in action. So again, instead of telling somebody, hey, I'm very creative, or hey, I'm very, I'm very gritty, your value in action would do a much better job of saying that you're gritty than just telling somebody that you're gritty, right? So I tell my students, like, show, but don't just tell. I mean, you can tell as part of telling the story, but don't just leave that as a statement, right? I'm gritty. Well, yeah, how are you gritty, right? So this is where the stories can help you. And the last part, this is typically the interview questions again, right? Tell me about a time you failed, or tell me about your weaknesses. And what I tell my coaches to prepare for is to think about a time they had a difficult challenge. And really, the story is not so much about the challenge itself, but it's more about what you did with it, the lessons learned. So these are the 4 types. And then the next part I want to get to telling you about is this whole amplification, right? Like, how do we get our messages out? So I have a great story about this. This is from the Revolutionary War. So have all of you heard of Paul Revere? Yes, no? I can't see you on camera, but if you say no, let me know on chat. So most of us, right, have only heard about Paul Revere, especially those of you that have spent time in Boston. So did you know there were 2 other writers? That night, there were 3 writers trying to warn, the people living in Boston that the British invasion was coming, right? So you can see the different colors. So Paul Revere rode the blue path, right? He rode from North Boston through Charlestown and up towards Concord to warn the people. And then there were 2 other riders. There was the green route, William Dawes, who took the southern route. He went through Roxbury, Brookline, Cambridge, and then finally out to Concord to warn people. And then there was a 3rd guy, Dr. Samuel Prescott. So any guesses as to why Paul Revere is the one everybody remembers? You can either chat it in or raise your hand. Any guesses? Why was he so successful versus these 2 other guys? Because if you look at, how far they rode and the number of people they warned, it's all about the same. So they rode the same distance, they warned the same number of people, but oh, easy name, maybe. Or there was a good story told about him, right? All right, well, without further ado, what was it about Paul Revere? Well, he basically went viral. So if you look at his network, he's more of this wide open network. So all the people he warned along the route told 10 other people, right? But then Samuel Prescott and Dawes, they had this closed network that you see all the way on the right. And what does a closed network mean? They already all know each other. So no additional people were warned, right? So you can see how having a good network gives you that exponential multiplier effect. But having a closed network where everybody already know each other, it's not as effective in getting a message out, right? So the lesson here is when you amplify your network, it's not just telling people that you know that already all know each other. Amplifying your network means to find basically like spokes of people, just like Paul Revere. He found people that told 10 other people, right? So it's amplifying the people you know to tell 10 other people they know that you're looking for this first board seat is what we're talking about in terms of networking. So we'll get to that in workshop 4. Okay, so lastly, I want to leave you with the community piece. So again, those of you, especially diverse candidates, I really recommend you check out some of these communities like Ascend Pinnacle for Asians, the African American Board Leadership for the diverse candidates, and also Latino corporate directors. They're all very active and have a lot of great programming. Check that out. But obviously for women, there's the 50-50 Women on Boards. There's Athena. There's How Women Lead. Even Quorum and Out. I worked with them before. They're a terrific organization too. And then there's also the board list. So each one of these, when I send out the follow-up deck, you'll see these. And as I said, I'll talk more about the recruiter firms too in session 5, because they're also amplifiers too, right? When recruiters know about you, they might also give you the chance of getting some visibility in front of the right people. And then lastly, if you're deciding not to go on this path, definitely take the board diversity playbook with you and see if your own company or your friend's company will be willing to look at how to diversify their boards. So that's what I have for content today. I want to get to the homework. So those of you joining me for the next session, sending you, so there will be a homework deck that's going to follow up with this blank wheel that I would like you to fill out in terms of thinking about your passion, your strength, the challenges you face, your potential. And so next time we get together, we're going to have the breakout groups where you can kind of compare notes and look at your peers' wheels if you feel comfortable sharing that. And then, kind of talk about the process, how you came up with it. So we can learn a lot from that, because that's something I've seen time and time again. When you instead of kind of sitting in your own room trying to describe yourself, it really helps to have that additional perspective. So I'm looking forward to doing that at our January 25th session. And then here are the questions, right? So I've added some additional ones. So what do you want to be known for, right? Your potential. What kind of problems do you solve? What do you stand for? What kind of recognition do you already have? So capture some of that in your values wheel and then answer these key questions that I have on the right? And then at the end, when I think about what's important about personal branding, if you don't brand yourself, not only are you not going to stand out, unfortunately, this famous marketing professor has said time and time again, if you are not a brand, you are just a commodity. So that's the importance, right? That's what's critical about helping you stand out, because again, women, we tend to, unfortunately end up in the invisible roles and don't have that visibility. So I'm here to tell you, it's very important to intentionally build that visibility so that you feel proud about your personal brand and that people can recognize you for your special set of skills. So yes, can somebody post the link for the next registration, or the next set anyways, just in case somebody hasn't seen that yet. So our next session is January 25th. I am going to send you off with the homework deck so you can work on your values and also think about maybe vision-wise, what you want to bring to the vision board exercise. So on that, I'm happy to start taking questions again in terms of what you've seen and anything else that I presented today. Thank you, Kelly, for the links. And let me stop sharing so We can get to the questions. Wanda, yes, go ahead.
Hi, Kelly. Again, thank you for this great presentation. Any pointers about how to network and to help not make it feel so icky for someone who's an introvert who masquerades as an extrovert?
Yeah. Right. Well, I think usually what I've seen for different things, right? Usually when I connect with people, there should be a reason, like a give take, right, Wanda?
Right.
So lately, I know I met this great venture capitalist. She was the first investor at Salesforce, Magdalena Yacio, and she was promoting her book about women in leadership. And so I reached out to her saying that, hey, you know, I have these great students. They're also early on, right, in STEM career. Would you like to be, you know, to answer some questions, right, for my students? And we set up a guest lecture session for that. And she happily did it, right? So that, like, if you have an event to kind of reach out to these guests and get to know them, know what's kind of the passion project or impact they want to make, that's how you can kind of start creating that give take, right? The bridge. Yeah. So that's one way. The other way is usually, I know I deliver content to, which I'm going to talk more about in session 3 and 4, where in writing about my lived experiences, in talking about board diversity, inevitably I get people like, hey, Kelly, you know, like, tell me more about this, right? Or they message me, or they tell me about something like just like what you're doing, asking me a specific question in terms of how do I start this? What does this mean? So that's another way so back to the introvert piece, if you write, people come to you, right, Wanda? And then the other trick I've used, not a trick really, when speakers do, like, you know, when they stay afterwards, hey, I'll answer any questions at the end, I go line up there, right? So yes, I get to interact with the speaker, but also along the way, I'm meeting other people. And usually we start chatting, right? Because you're just sitting there waiting. So we start chatting and I get to meet them and also get to meet the speaker.
Great. No, he's really helpful. Thank you, Kelly.
Sure. Thanks for that question, Wanda. Anything in chat? Have I answered any there? Kelly, have you seen any that's people would like to have answered, or
No, both the
about the
chat and
homework? I
Q&A
usually get that with my
Q&A.
students. What about the homework?
Now, you said you are sending around the slides. Is that going to go through email, or can you remind folks where they're going to have access to that?
So now I think we usually have a, like, how do we usually do the pre-read from the registrants?
Yeah, I think we can go through national and ask for it to be sent to all the people who registered today.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not sending the entire deck, but it's mostly like, you know, the highlights from today and then the homework that I'm asking you to do. So that's what's in the homework. It's like maybe 7 or 8 pages. So if there aren't any questions, maybe let's see if I can bring that up. I have it pulled up already. Where is it? But yeah, if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer while we're here.
Kelly, I can ask a question.
Yeah.
Do you see folks often getting stuck along the first half of this journey as folks are starting off? And how do you suggest we dodge that or mitigate any type of sticky points?
You know, back to the community piece, I definitely have seen that in Boardroom Ready, where, you know, a year into the program and they see some of their peers already have board seats. And meanwhile, they're like, wait, you know, we started at the same time. How come they have the board seats and I don't? But lo and behold, we have mentors and sponsors and coaches like myself come in and tell them like, look, from what I've seen, right? Like right now it's a tough environment in terms of getting jobs and probably even board seats. But we try to help normalize it for everybody who's kind of on that same journey. So back to what I said about doubling down on community, if you can find a group of women who are all trying to get on board seats, or even as you're looking for a new job to look for other job searchers, it's the same effect. It's letting everybody know, hey, I'm on a down day, and your peers, and especially the women bio peers I've come across, you guys are really good at supporting each other. So, even though it does feel like you're the only one, how come I'm the only one not getting a board seat? Having a community to talk about it, to share experiences, I think is the critical part of that, to get you through that tough, the downhill, the inevitable downhill. Katya, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I actually have a question that's aligned with the comment you just made. So about the community piece, not everybody would join the board ready cohort, of course, and not everybody would be successful trying to join it. So what is your recommendation on kind of building up that community along the broader audience with women in bio? Is there a group that's
right here today?
Okay.
We have all these great women here, right? Obviously we can kind of message each other, whatever, but if you are serious about getting on the board journey, like reach out to everybody that you see here today, like, hey, what are you looking for? And then obviously as we go through workshop 2, 3, 4, and 5, we're going to see the same faces, right? And I would recommend, if there isn't one, Katya, that you start a group, right? Hey, let's do a workshop 6, even though Kelly's not there, right? Or 7 or 8. Yeah.
I guess I just have to ask for the contact information, a contact list from the organizers of the webinar, so we can all stay in touch if possible, so we can figure out how we do that. But that would be amazing. Yes, definitely helpful to have that community and group, to have the bouncing board and on your personal journey. I do have a follow-up question on this as well. Obviously, this is not going to be an easy journey to make, and there will be rejections for practically everyone. So how do you get meaningful feedback? Something beyond, we had 800 successful or 800 applicants and we only needed 2. We regret to inform you, but how do you actually find out what, where what you can learn from that experience, and how to build your journey to be more successful or more relevant in the future?
Right. Well, it's back to that networking piece I talked to Wanda about. I've had many coaches, and myself included, when I've gone through interviews, and some of them are great, right? And some of them like, oh, that didn't land. But the ones that were great in sending back your thank you note and maybe seeing them again at some other conference, pull them aside and ask them, hey, I thought it went really great. I know you can't tell me exactly why, but what are some advice you can give me, right? For the next time I do one of these interviews. And back to what I said about the Boardroom Ready Woman directory, chances are there's somebody or someone that know them. So ask for an introduction to see how did you get your first board seat, or what was it like to do those interviews? Because the more you talk to people, the more you'll get a sense of how to do it, right? In a way that's likely for you to be more successful. And that is the long game. I'm sorry to say, right, Katya? There's no shortcut. That's the long game. Yeah. And so investors can give you advice. Like I said, but the best people, if you're on the board journey, are people sitting on boards, right? So to reach out to all the people that sit on boards, and some will be generous, some will be not as much, and to ask them if there are other people that they can recommend to help you think about what's next, what steps to take. And back to what you said about experiences, a lot of times, what do I call it? Adjacent experiences. So for example, you might not be directly raising, whatever, consecutive rounds of capital, but maybe in nonprofit fundraising, right? You're showing a similar kind of skill. Or in, I don't know, what else would be similar? Like, being creative, right? Okay, I may not have directly gotten these angel investors or VC investors sign up, but I did something very similar in whatever that project is, right? If those of you in bigger companies, right? Getting buy-ins, persuading people, getting through barriers. So think about ways where you can describe a similar experience, even though you haven't directly had it. So the age-old chicken and egg problem, right? If you don't have it now, how can you get a similar experience?
Thank you.
Of course. Any others?
Hi, this
And
is
I
Eleni.
definitely was planning on staying till 1:30, so I'll stay on as long as you like.
Hi, this is Eleni Lagos.
Hi, Lenny.
Hi, thank you for this. Has been a really great presentation. Actually, want to say hello. I'm from the New York chapter, co-chair of Executive Women in Bio.
Fantastic.
I wanted to touch on this, or bridge rather, what many of us have, which is a resume, with what you mentioned as the bio, which may tell our story. So personally speaking, I've been in a role as a national tax leader for life sciences, a CPA, but I'm not your typical tax person. I'm the global relationship leader. I've also, my specialty is in financial reporting of taxes. So I have both an audit hat and a tax consulting hat. And many times my time is spent partnering with the CFO, the C-suite, and the finance team to be their outsourced, tax function and really quarterback everything that they would need from a tax standpoint, but also from any other advisory, standpoint that I would bring. A lot of that doesn't come across in my resume, right? Where I'm coming, where I'm just saying tax partner. And I also feel that, I also feel that a lot of the board positions when it comes to having a finance background are really reserved for retired audit partners, not necessarily those that, have some other background. So I guess I have two questions. One is, how do you recommend kind of putting forth that your skill set may not necessarily come through in your resume? Is it because you're attaching a bio in all cases, or, at the top of your resume? That's question one. And question two is, what is the typical makeup of a board? How many seats are reserved for people with a business background? Is it, because you see chief medical officer, you see, chief maybe manufacturing office, well, that's more management, but, from a board standpoint, I many times see in life science companies that there is a scientific background. So, of course, ideally they'll have a mix of that, but not everybody's, Vivek Ramaswamy. So who was my client, by the way. Roivant Sciences was my client. So I do know Vivek. So I guess, that's my question is, how do we really kind of know how much our backgrounds are in demand, so that if a board is made up of 10 people, are they really looking for, 9 people with a science background and only 1 with a business?
Yeah. Well, okay. So let me tackle the specialist conundrum. So I've had many, mentorees that were general counsels, right? And so again, the boards tend to see you as, well, general counsel, I got one of those. Why do I need one on my board, right? Or even somebody who's cybersecurity or CTO. And so again, I've had, some of them with the feedback like, well, I'll just hire one of those, right? I'll hire a cybersecurity expert. I'll hire somebody, or I already have a CTO. Why do I need one on my board? And so the question there is back to what I said about the T, Eleni. You have your depth, but you need to demonstrate your breadth. So how do you do that? And so luckily, some of my board ready people, it's through their work when they've advised, on a certain transaction, or when they work with a particular board member, they saw it, right? And so they can vouch for them. But other times when they don't know you, how do you? And so that's back to what I'm going to do in workshop 3 and 4 is to clarify those stories. And then if you don't have it, right, if there's a gap, it is to figure out how do I find those experiences so I can start talking about it, right? So if you don't have it now, if that breadth isn't there, how do you start, building it? And that might be through serving on a nonprofit board or doing something as an observer, right? To start, filling in that. So instead of somebody filling in the blanks for you, you're filling it by being able to talk about it. And so in those interviews, so earlier about how you didn't raise whatever, however many rounds, that's a wish list, right? A lot of those job things, it's a wish list. Of course, everybody was, shooting for the moon. But the reality is, not everybody has raised, 4, 5, 6 rounds of funding. So in lieu of that, what could that be? And that's where your creativity comes in, right? Where can I find that adjacent experience that's really going to speak to my advisory capacity, my strategic, my EQ, and my, gritty, or my perseverance, innovation, all of that. So, like I said, I usually dial people back because I know they're looking at their current, but you also need to do the gap analysis of, okay, here's where I like to be, but what are the missing pieces?
And in my case, my breadth is there, as is my depth.
Yeah.
But on paper or in, kind of passing along, I have conversations all the time with attorneys, with investment bankers. And so they get to know us in this phone call and say, hey, send me your resume so that I can float it. But that resume is going to just show the depth. I feel
exactly
that the issue is how do you present yourself on paper, because that's what everybody always asks for is the resume. How do you demonstrate the depth so that it doesn't become 4 pages? Do you just, do you recommend putting a bio on top of the resume, or just not even providing
the paper on text
resume?
will never do you justice, Eleni. Let me tell you that right now. The paper on text will never do you justice. So in fact, the most valuable from what I've seen is that amplifying your network. It's somebody like, let's say it's me, Kelly, that knows, oh my gosh, you need to have her on your board because I've seen her do this. I've seen her do this. She's this kind of executive. You see her as a CPA tax person, but that is not, she brings a lot more than that. But then you need to first, as I said, right, narrowing down your 20 years into the 2 paragraphs such that I'll remember to say it. And also that when I experience you, that it's so memorable, I'm going to tell everybody about it. Oh my gosh, right? When she came into this transaction, she did this, she pulled this out of the, deep hole. So it's that, like reactivating the people that know you, that's going to vouch for you and tell that consistent story.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so I was going to share that homework deck, but any other questions? Okay, so let me get to the homework thing. For those of you that are still here, it should be showing up in a second. So this is my homework deck that I, will be forwarding to all of you. So basically, again, kind of a quick overview of what I covered today, right? The 5-step process, having you work on the wheel, the questions that I'm including. Also, if you want, and I think this is going to be part of what we do next time on January 25th, is to have you see if you can capture your vision in a wheel too. Because what we're trying to do, I mentioned the gap analysis. If you can look at your present wheel, right? And then look at your potential, what you're capable of, or what you're looking forward to do wheel, and see back to what I just said to Eleni, right? yes, I want to serve on a board. Yes, I want to be strategic. Yes, I want to be known as that T-shaped thinker. But what's missing, right? What are some experiences that I still need to fill out to make sure I get to that? And then the vision board, as I said, you can have a quick look at that with my guest speaker, and then learning about this types of stories. So we won't be doing this till session 3 and 4, but I wanted you to have it because I'm sure some of you can put it to use already. And then the community links are all here. So that's the homework piece. Anyone else? We're at time, but I'm happy to stay and answer any other questions that's popping up. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I really enjoy getting to know you and look forward to seeing you at session 2.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Kelly. Look forward to
Thank
seeing
you, Kelly.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
That was really helpful, so informative.
Thank you, everybody.
Wonderful day. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Very, very helpful.
Thank you. So now, the